Hello, welcome. Welcome back to our February speaker series. This is a series that we've been having for just about the last year, not quite a year, from Sky's the Limit Fund. And it is really an opportunity for you to get to learn a little bit more about wilderness therapy, about what goes on at wilderness therapy, and all the things around that. So family work, all of the questions that you might have. So we work really hard to bring you some information and education about wilderness therapy and the people that work in that setting. And I am Brenda Zane. I'm a board member for Sky's the Limit, and I am the lucky one who gets to bring you this speaker series and talk with amazing people from the partner programs that we work with. And today we have an incredible guest who's going to share so much with us about some of the family work that needs to happen when we have a child who's struggling, not even necessarily in wilderness therapy. So Sky's the Limit Fund, if you're here, you're listening, you might know a little bit about us, but we help make wilderness therapy more accessible for more families. It is an incredible treatment modality. It is also incredibly expensive. And so we work really hard to help fund young adults and teens who need that modality but aren't able to access it. And so we are just glad to have you here today. If you're one of our donors, we thank you tremendously for all of the work that you help us do. Today, we are going to talk with Travis Slagle. He is the clinical director at Evoke Intensives. Evoke Wilderness Therapy is one of our programs. And Travis has over 20 years of experience working with young people and families in crisis. So he has a very extensive background in wilderness therapy and as a parent coach, as a program leader with Evoke. He's very passionate about experiential therapy, which you're going to hear about today. It's something that you might not have heard about in the past. And he's really an advocate for helping parents heal alongside their kids. And so this is something that we sometimes don't hear about. We talk a lot about our kids and trying to get our kids healthy, and we don't talk as much about the work that the family has to do. So Travis and his team specialize in facilitating custom workshops, and they also do retreats for individuals and families and couples. So I'm excited to have him here today to talk. So welcome, Travis.
Thanks so much for having me, Brenda.
Yeah, I am really excited to talk today because I took a little peek at your material, and this was something that I learned as an alumni parent from wilderness therapy, is that we often go into this not knowing that we as parents have a lot of work to do. I'm sure that you find that in the work that you do. And so we just think it's our kid that needs the help. So I think it's going to be great for parents to hear that aspect of it. And then once we do realize that we need that help, we're like, where do we get it? Who is there to help me through this process? I talk with moms a lot, and they will often say, I talked to my therapist and she had no idea what I was talking about with an adolescent or young adult who's really, struggling with mental health or substance use. So I think there's a unique perspective that you bring to that. And then this idea of experiential therapy, I'm excited to hear more about. When I think of therapy personally, I think of sitting in a chair or on a couch in an office park with my therapist. So I have a feeling what you're going to talk about is a little bit different. So I will let you jump in, and I might pipe in with questions too.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brenda. I really appreciate it. And it's so great to be able to be with you and with all the listeners out there. My background, I basically worked in wilderness therapy for almost 15 years, worked in some aftercare settings. One of my experiences that has been kind of a recurring theme throughout that whole time was hearing the stories of the parents and the emotional experience that they were going through in the process of trying to get their kids help and to make sense of oftentimes situations that are very scary. And I find in my own personal life and also as a therapist that my kids have been my greatest teachers. And I often find that the families and the parents I work with would resonate with that idea as well. Oftentimes, we are working in a state of crisis, and there's a need for immediate intervention. And so the idea of kind of taking some time to really look at, ourselves and doing our own personal work, understanding our own childhood history and how that informs us as parents, how that has shaped us and our understanding of our boundaries and our needs and how we respond to feelings. I like to say that therapy is really about helping people learn how to feel. And that starts with ourselves. And oftentimes we talk a lot about in the therapy world about behaviors. And sometimes that can lead us into missing some deeper awareness about what those behaviors are trying to communicate, and what are the underlying emotional needs in those behaviors, and how we can kind of more effectively respond to them from a place of deeper attunement and attachment. And that's a big kind of part of what I think makes a lasting kind of change and positive outcomes in treatment. So through my journey of working individually with parents and working with young, adolescents and young adults out in the field, in outdoor settings, in experiential programs that really strive towards innovation and doing a service to the whole person versus just the behavior. What I found was that a lot of parents were asking, well, what do I do? Where do I go to get, where's a wilderness program for me?
Right. Yes.
What do I do? Because a lot of times the kids are going to be exposed to such transformative information about themselves and experiences in their lives and understanding that is sometimes beyond any of our expectations. And then parents are kind of, and siblings are sometimes left on the sidelines, having to be taught, basics of like, what's an I statement? What's the difference between a feeling and a thought, and understanding boundaries and reflecting on things that are in our control and out of our control. And sometimes that can be a big learning curve for parents, and as their kids are making some radical changes. And that disconnect can often lead to feelings of frustration and distrust, for a young person to go through that level of vulnerable experience, and then having parents kind of waiting for them just to kind of show up changed often leads to some major regressions. And so, what you'll find in research is that parents that do their own work with a child in treatment have the greatest positive outcomes in treatment. That is one of the greatest predictors and lasting change that we can do for our kids and for our families, is us taking some time when we feel safe, when our kids are in a safe place, to start doing some deeper work about things that are happening inside of us that are showing up in our reactions, that show up in our anger. It's indicative of where our distress tolerance is at. All of those kind of little pieces of the puzzle are rooted in our history. And so sometimes when we're in that crisis management of my kid is in danger and I need to get help, and there's an out of home placement, there are so many moving parts. And when we think about experiential therapy, the first experience many parents are having in that process of intervention is fear. And that fear is such a powerful force inside of the nervous system that it puts us in such a go and action mode. It really prevents us from slowing down and noticing what's happening, noticing our patterns. And these are often times where I'm working with parents who are asking me to fix their kids, and I'm working with kids who are asking me to fix their parents. And we have to figure out a way to start, collaborating and helping to de-shame the process of therapy. There's a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of, I work with lots of parents who come into the process, having kind of a perception that, the therapist is there to kind of say it's your fault, when it's oftentimes these patterns and these kinds of behaviors are intergenerational, they're environmental, they're built into the culture of our society, and the social media and the stressors and the information, the constant barrage of information that young people are having to absorb and process. It's beyond the capacity of our nervous systems, and it naturally brings up our anxiety. And if we as parents are walking around in this world saying we don't have anxiety, we're missing something. We all have anxiety. And the more we have a relationship to our fears and our anxieties, the more we understand ourselves and how we respond to them, the safer it is to help our kids work with their anxiety. But if we're kind of standing on a pedestal saying, I got my life together and you need to go out there and get help, we're creating an experience of shame. Because ultimately we all have anxiety, we all have vulnerabilities, we all can have a reference point of what pain and hurt and loneliness and fear feels like in our own lived experiences. And when we can tap into that in a way that we are contained, we're not looking to our kids to solve our emotional needs, we're looking to be a safe self-contained human being, an emotionally attuned, boundaried person who can be able to be in moments of discomfort and stay curious and stay in a place of learning versus us kind of being the teacher. Those are the magical moments when we can transform the lives in our children and really create a new kind of experience in the future generations of our family.
Yeah, I think when you talked about that fear, because if you are a parent who's in that situation, you've been in fear for so long, and then your child is now safe in this place. It does provide you with that calm time to do some focused work if you have the energy. Right. So a lot of times I think people have to take a little bit of time to do that as well. Yes. And then to have somebody guide you who's also either connected with your child or at least understands what they're going through would be so valuable, because you're using language that, like, I had never heard that before we sent our son to wilderness. So I think it's really great that you have this program that helps connect the rest of the family, because you're right. When the kid is making forward progress and parents and siblings are still back here, that's just kind of a recipe for disaster when the two come back to meet again.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what has been kind of a big, kind of blind spot and our area of need is we have really great interventions for kids, to step outside of their current context, to kind of connect with a peer group, to start kind of digging into the parts of themselves that they are compensating for. But we haven't, kind of bridged the gap in many ways to kind of really bring the parents into a place of a parallel process that goes beyond, just a letter writing and reading a book and sharing what you learned from a book. So Evoke Intensives was started with that kind of idea in mind, that we can work with parents throughout the country, and we're actually working with lots of individuals throughout the world. Most of them have people in treatment, but we're working with folks who are all across the spectrum of demographics to help individuals be a safer, more connected, more integrated person. And that naturally trickles down into our relationships. And that can be a relationship with a spouse. That can be a relationship with our children. I run, intensives with grandparents, and the ability to kind of start bringing, the family system into the process of personal growth and transformation creates an experience for a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old to suddenly see that they are the catalyst for growth. And they are kind of the doorway for new kind of possibility in their family, versus the stigma of I'm bad, or I'm not good, or, I have this OCD problem and therefore, my parents couldn't handle me. We really want to try to start challenging that idea that a lot of times these issues that we're here to tackle are the gateway to transformation in the lives of a family system. And that's beautiful. That's a gift. That's where we can empower these young people to be, the trailblazers in the lives of our family, versus what the perception is that they're getting is that they're a burden. And we want to really help them see, like, no, you have taught me so much. You've given me the opportunity of introspection that I was too busy and I was too kind of focused on, the idea of the provider and the kind of, and the problem solver and the fixer and the comforter, to actually start seeing where all those impulses were really coming from. And oftentimes it's our insecurities, and it's our vulnerabilities, and it's our anxieties, and parents are not, immune to that. In many ways, we just get more sophisticated ways to avoid it.
Right. We become very sophisticated. Yeah. I love how you just described that, shifting the focus from you are the troublemaker, you are the one who's causing all these problems, to actually you're the doorway. That's such a perfect way to think about it. You're the doorway to our family changing and becoming healthier. And I just think that would help so much with the shame that I think our kids feel a lot of the time. So that's incredible. Yeah. Light bulb moment.
Thanks. So I have a couple of slides. I'd love to share them if you want.
That'd be great.
And then we can keep the conversation going. I'd love to keep it going. One of the things I started off with was, before I was a parent, I was really interested in philosophy and was just so invested in kind of new ideas. And so, Buddhism was something that I was, and all sorts of religions were fascinating to me. But this idea of the monk, and I really did used to admire Buddhist monks. And then I realized they don't have children and spouses, and in a lot of ways, the heroes in my life as a parent, as a therapist, as somebody who is really focused on trying to make lasting change in the world we live in, is the experience of a parent is one of the most heroic, one of the most brave, and one of the most vulnerable things that I know. And when we start to kind of step into that space of we don't have the answers, we are kind of experimenting, making things up, responding from our own traumas, from our history, and being in a place of more of a vulnerable position. That's a really tough thing when we're responsible for the lives of others. And so oftentimes we can kind of put on a brave face, like I gotta, hide my emotions from my kids. I gotta kind of, keep the axe to the grinder and just kind of power through. It leaves something missing and kind of becoming a more authentic sense of who we are. And I do believe ultimately there is something in every single person out there that needs healing. And as a parent, when we recognize that in ourselves, in a place of power and in love and in integrity, we create a space where getting help is no longer taboo. It's courageous, and there's one fundamental thing we can help our kids do is learn how to be assertively ask for what they need, and to be able to accept when there are limits to what other people can do to solve other people's problems. And I often believe that, we are, an emotional problem requires an emotional solution. And so that concept is so kind of difficult in many ways. And from a parent perspective of, we get a tutor, we get an executive functioning coach, we get a nutritionist, we look for all these external solutions to ultimately, like, it's the relationship is where we have the greatest influence in our lives. That when we think about correcting behavior, connection is the correction. And so I admire parents much more than I admire monks when I was younger.
Yes. Doing the very hard work of being a parent.
Absolutely. And we can go to the next slide. So one thing I'd like to just touch on, and there's a lot of research going on in this. This is a big kind of development that's happening in neuropsychology and in family systems therapy, is this idea of intergenerational trauma. And intergenerational trauma is actually now being understood on a neurochemical level, and how it expresses certain genes in the body. So sometimes what we can now identify is, there are issues when I'm working with families where there is a literal kind of sense of, we have no idea where this is coming from, and I would say my bias is as therapist, so I recognize that, but I believe that what is hysterical is often historical. Something in our history that has set into motion these things. And sometimes this can actually skip generations. And so there's a powerful book I'd like to, folks, if people are interested in this, it's a book called It Didn't Start With You: How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. And that's by Mark Wallen. It's a great book. And I would encourage people to check that out, because it gives a window into starting to do that introspection in ourselves, to pay closer attention that there are these implicit, almost like more so imprinted responses that come from, sometimes generations. If I think about, anger, the anger that I saw in my parents and the anger I saw in my grandparents, and the ways that gets processed and suppressed, and the ways we project it. I mean, that could be found in my family tree. And so, rather than kind of looking away or saying, oh, I don't have anger issues. We all have anger. We all have anxiety. It takes a courageous person to start to look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's much easier to blame the social media, the marijuana, the bad boyfriend, the bad girlfriend, whatever it is, because those are just easy things to latch on to and to look at and to see. versus having to dig deeper and say, oh, whoa, this might be something that's coming from somewhere else.
Absolutely. And really it's really about mindfulness. I mean, there's so much. I mean, Dan Siegel's Parenting from the Inside Out is another amazing book. I highly recommend it. You know, his idea is really just how we can have more mindful attention, awareness, bringing into awareness our thoughts and our feelings, so that, you know, the boyfriend and the social media and the marijuana use and all the things that are like activating events, we have just a little bit more room to pause, to pay attention and to notice and to feel and to notice our automatic thoughts. And we have, and really love and relationship is about capacity. If we are, you know, in a state of constant fear and trauma, we have very little capacity to be curious, to ask those questions, to allow ourselves to feel our emotions. And therefore we just go into problem solving. And a lot of times when kids experience a parent's problem solving, you know, as parents, we think we're being helpful, but from a kid's perspective, they think that they're the problem. Something's wrong with me. My parents are acting crazy. You know, the parents are thinking, no, we're not acting crazy. We're just trying to help you. And the child's experience is oftentimes, you think something's wrong with me. And so there's a room to slow it down, to notice our reactions, to help to contain ourselves a little bit more. And intergenerational trauma is a perspective that really helps us get a window into where these things come from.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can see. I wrote down the names of those books, and I think we'll be able to list those as well with the video. So
Excellent.
Thank you for those.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So experiential therapy. And so, you know, what Evoke Intensives does is, you know, we work with families, couples, individuals, creating, you know, anywhere between a 2.5 day to a 4.5 day experiential, kind of a fully immersive experience into, you know, doing our own work. And what that could look like is, you know, lots of different kind of experiential activities to help people start to kind of build some deeper insight in themselves. And so, you know, our kids go off to treatment, or they go to a certain place to kind of start doing, you know, safely start looking within themselves. And we as parents, we need that too. And oftentimes what I'd recommend is that there are great moments to bring the family together and to do that all together. But I'd say more than 50% of the time, it actually helps to do, at least at your first kind of step into this process, do it separately. You know, if our first experience in this journey is fear, you know, there's work that we have to do without our kids being present, without them watching that, where we can actually start to learn and listen to that feeling inside of ourselves without our kids having to caretake that feeling. It's not our kids' jobs to alleviate our fears. And that's a big, sometimes a huge learning moment. You know, sometimes, you know, we're expecting, now if my kid falls in line and kind of follows the plan and stays off of drugs, then, you know, they're going to make me less anxious. That ultimately, your anxiety is your responsibility. Your fear is your responsibility. And if you're asking a 16-year-old to take responsibility for a 50-year-old's anxiety, we're going to create some issues.
Yeah.
So we want to create an experience, a safe experience, where we can start to share and start to process. So there's an activating experience, there is a reflective experience, and then there is an integration experience. And so an intensive could be a 2.5 day experience. Sometimes with parents, there's a lot of tension between parents many times, different parenting styles, different childhood experiences that are shaping how they're reacting to their kids' distress. So let's bring the parents together, and we can do the old school kind of term for it was marathon sessions, where there would be a full day, 8 hours. We have lots of breaks, lots of kind of getting up. It's not just sitting, you know, there'd be expressive art, there'd be, you know, some role play, there would be some guided meditation, there'd be some psychoeducation, and it's really a deep dive. And, you know, many people talk about this intensive being something that's equivalent to a year's worth of therapy in a weekend. So it's an accelerant for helping to kind of build that sense of awareness in ourselves so that we can show up with more capacity with our loved ones. Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. It sounds intense. I bet there's a lot of emotions that come out, but when you talked about the parents who are on different pages, that is really hard. So it seems like having a place to do that with somebody
Yeah,
who's very qualified to help you, who's
absolutely.
been there before, would be incredible.
It's
Speaking
amazing.
from experience.
Absolutely. It's amazing. And it is scary. It's like, it's the hero's journey. It's stepping into the unknown. And in many ways, we're asking our kids to do that. We're asking
Yeah.
them to step into the unknown and feel their feelings. And why can't we do the same? And in that experience, what we discover is we are stronger, more resilient, and sometimes more capable than we imagine. So I wanted to share some of like lessons learned from experiences. This is kind of my collective experience working with families for almost 20 years now. As I was mentioning earlier, your emotions are your responsibility. And there is sometimes in some kind of wilderness models, there's this assignment of the impact letter. And there is kind of it's a very subtle shift between telling a child what you feel in order for them to change versus telling a child what you feel in order for you to change. What I'm learning about my fear is what I'm learning is that I need boundaries. Oftentimes I would say if we're experiencing anger, we're experiencing impatience, if we're experiencing frustration, that's a signal that we need better boundaries. That's telling us, that's information. It's not necessarily information that our kid needs to suddenly kind of get in line and follow the program. It's really a time for us to kind of get clear. What are my boundaries? What do I need? That's kind of step one. Your emotions are your responsibility. One thing that's, going back to what you're saying, it is hard. They're in intensives and therapy and kind of stepping into this process after already being in some life and death kind of crisis moments, learning how to grieve. And I would say that grief is one of, the biggest predictors of our mental health. Our ability to grieve is, I think, a correlation to our mental well-being. The harder it is for us to grieve, the harder it is for us to kind of move through those processes of anger and denial and bargaining and to experience our pain, to be able to get to a place of understanding and acceptance. The more resistance, the more denial, the more we refuse that, the harder our lives become. Grief is it's one of the hardest things, I would say. I think about my own journey as becoming a parent. I had a birth plan. I remember my wife and I, and our first child, we had a birth plan, and nothing went to plan. and it was scary. There were some complications, and there were some things about it that we were not fully prepared for, and there was no way to prepare for. There was no way to even predict. And it was the very first lesson that repeats itself over and over again about letting go, about, we can have all sorts of plans, but life will throw us many, many curveballs, and learning how to grieve, learning how to let go. It's our life's work. Surrendering the need to be right and surrendering the need to be good. This is very important and very challenging. Oftentimes I will spend many, many hours in couple sessions and family sessions where people are debating old facts. A child has a different kind of memory of what's happened. A spouse is saying, you did something wrong. You were bad when you did that. And we exhaust ourselves trying to prove our point. And it's time to start stepping into a space where, it's about becoming a self. A self has duality. We have good in us, we have bad in us. We have right, we have wrong. And if our kids are being kind of almost into this pressure cooker of needing to be good, needing to be right, you're going to create a lot of performance anxiety. You're going to get a lot of placating, a lot of behaviors where they pretend everything's okay, and they're hiding all that anxiety until it comes out in an explosion, in a crisis. And many people are caught off guard, and they say, oh, they were all A students last semester. Where did this come from? The need to be good and the need to be right creates a lot of sneaky behavior, and it creates a lot of lying, and it creates a lot of manipulation.
Good. Yeah.
Yep. So boundaries are for you and limits are for others. Boundaries are about how we take care of ourselves. I cannot sleep at night if there's drugs in my home. So my boundary is there's no drugs in my home. We're not going to get into kind of watching old YouTube videos of, what your brain does to you on drugs. For me, maybe for, the parents down the street, they can sleep at night if there's drugs in the home. I can't. So the boundary that I need for me, no drugs in the home. And, if the child says, you're crazy, you're stupid, you're too controlling, you're not trying to be right, you're not trying to be good. Maybe I am being controlling. My nervous system can be funny sometimes.
I like that response.
Right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
ultimately, you don't get into a tug of war if you don't pick up the rope. So your boundaries are for you, limits are for others. Growth is uncomfortable. This is, it sounds obvious, but when we are hearing reports from the therapists of our kids in the field, or kind of starting to kind of hear about change is messy. Change has, kind of all sorts of, sometimes if a child is angry, that can be a good thing. How very little safe places we have in the world to be angry. And so, if it feels uncomfortable, that actually might be a sign of growth. If it feels like it's too easy, if it feels like it's too good to be true, maybe we're missing something.
Yeah.
Another piece that's really important, and this is like when we think about how we want to show up as a parent or a self in any relationship, we want to be a safe person to talk to, a safe person to come to. Like a lot of young people are afraid of judgment. They're afraid of being blamed. They're afraid of, being scolded. So we want to try to have equal parts empathy and equal parts boundaries. So if we're thinking about a recipe book, it's equal parts of each. And oftentimes, we can be good at one and struggle with the other. Some are really good with the boundaries, but the emotional attunement is difficult. Some are overly effusive with the emotional empathy and really struggle with the boundaries. We want to try to integrate the two. Another one, curiosity is the antidote for anxiety. Very, very important. Thinking about, in the journey towards what do I need in order to ask more questions? Oftentimes, if we're in a place of anxiety, we're trying to control, we're trying to solve, we're trying to neutralize the threat, whatever that may be, versus the curiosity is, what can I learn from this? What is this kind of reaction inside of me telling me about what I need? Curiosity is set, and I find that it's very hard to be curious and anxious at the same time. So if we are having family therapy and a therapist is saying, to mom or dad, practice curiosity, and and the child is saying, they don't seem very curious. The opportunity would be, like, yeah, I'm working with my anxiety. It's not for you to problem solve. I'm taking care of it. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm doing an intensive. I'm journaling. I'm taking care of myself, but I am noticing that I have more anxiety than I thought. Beautiful. It's a great place for a child to see their parents as human, not this kind of, golden Buddha on its pedestal that they have to live up. Yep.
Love that one.
Couple more is all healing is self-healing. This is really important. Oftentimes and this is, very, very true. We think we're putting our kids into treatment to get them help, to help them heal. Ultimately, the only healing that we can fully have kind of like power over and influence is our own healing. And what I find is that when we tap into that, when we make that realization, it's not just hearing a therapist say it on a spreadsheet, but it's you believing it. Oh my gosh, I can heal. That naturally makes it safe for others to heal. And so if we're thinking, I want to heal my family, the next kind of like sentiment could be, and that starts with me. And then that creates everything in motion, because we have the self-healing response inside of each of us. If we create the right conditions, if I am in an active role of healing myself, it will naturally create space for others to do the same for them.
Love it.
Yep. Learning to speak to your fears and anxiety. So rather than kind of writing a letter to your children, telling them all of your fears and all of your anxiety, write a letter to your fears and your anxiety. Dear fear, I am paralyzed with knowing what to do and how to kind of react, and I'm tired of living this way. Write it to your feelings. Be in relationship with these emotions, and that way our kids aren't the ones that are the processing ground for our own emotional needs. That way, if you write that letter to your fear and anxiety, your next letter to your kids is going to be so much more fluid, so much more, like less needy, less of this kind of this urgency where that anxiety, and you can kind of say, I'm working on my anxiety so I can show up and just be a better listener. So last part, most solutions are part of the problem. People don't like this one too much. So what I mean by that is that oftentimes, when we are trying to control the situation, when we're trying to problem solve, we're contributing to the problem. Again, going back to a place of curiosity. What do we need in order to kind of approach this from a different place of being with the problem versus having to control it? We want to be thinking more about being in the relationship with these situations versus having to solve them. And what we find is that each person naturally starts to create space to tap into resources in themselves to contribute to more solution versus it being forced, contrived solution. This oftentimes happens in behaviorally focused therapy. If we're just talking about behaviors and we're not actually learning about ourselves, we're contributing to the problem. We're not contributing to the relationship. And my belief in the Evoke Intensives kind of model is that we heal, we are wounded in relationships, and we heal in relationships. That's where you're going to get the depth in your work. Worksheets and diagrams and skill building, that does provide, a good kind of scaffolding. But if we really want to stand firm in the ground, we need to know who we are and what we feel and what we need. All right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is an amazing list. I bet a lot of people are going to be screenshotting this when they watch the video, because those are great ones. We need a little cheat sheet that we can, just write out. So thank you for going through those. Those are really, really excellent.
Great. Yeah. Well, I think we could pause there if we wanted just to kind of chat a little bit more, and if there's any questions.
Wow. Well, I think what you said there, and sort of the theme that I picked up, is what's intuitive for a parent, I think often is to fix. We just go into fix mode. And I don't think it's necessarily out of arrogance. I don't think it's necessarily that we think we have all of, that we have all the answers. We just have this need to protect our kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, like, your points were really good, because it just makes you pause for a minute and think about, just because it's your natural response doesn't mean it's the right response.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great reflection. And I would say that what I find a lot with working with parents is that, there is a developmental curve to our kids' experiences, but there's also a developmental curve to a parent's journey. In a first kind of years of life, our nervous systems, our whole kind of state of being is being kind of inoculated with this need to protect and this need to kind of, assume this role that this person is literally dependent on me. They're almost like an appendage of my body, literally.
Yes.
And then we start to kind of moving into adolescence and young adults. There is that idea, that feeling in our nervous system is still there. And yet the script is switched, where it's actually about autonomy and individuation and allowing space for each person to have differences and separation, and which is a very kind of different way of thinking, because we've spent the first phase of our lives as parents, assuming the role of the protector, the provider, the teacher, the policeman, all of the pieces of these roles that we play, which is kind of part of the intensive work, is that we start to look at our roles. We start to kind of sometimes even have role plays that help us to kind of connect to these parts of ourselves where there's such a strong idea of caretaking that, it's not saying that it's wrong or it's right or good or bad. We're getting out of that way of thinking, right? We're getting into a way of curiosity, like noticing there's something inside of me that really wants to fix this. Where did this come from? Where did this start? Oh, I remember when my birth plan went to crap and I needed to kind of, go into action mode. It's happening again 10 years later. And I'm like, oh, these things are not isolated events. They are connected, deeply connected.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I heard sort of overtly in between the lines is we have to have a certain level of comfort to be uncomfortable and let our kids know that we're uncomfortable.
Yes.
It feels like, instead of coming with all the answers, coming with the solutions, that we need to be able to say, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know how to fix this,
beautiful.
but I'm going to be there with you to work on it.
Beautiful.
Which again goes against our nature, because it's like, I'm supposed to have all the answers. Right. I'm supposed to know what to do.
Oh my goodness. And it's so true. And that I'm supposed to, I should, we in therapy world, we talk about the tyranny of the shoulds. What is the idea of the thing that I should be, or I should be doing, or, kind of comparing ourselves, the comparisons to, the parents on the Facebook pages and the parents down the streets. And oh my goodness, it's like, it's all the should is is destroying us. And the shoulds are also getting, talked about intergenerational trauma. Our shoulds get passed on to our kids.
Yes. Yes. And even though we're adults trying to parent our own young adult children, we're still getting them from our parents.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that it's just the layers of shoulds. So well, I love your list. I think that's going to be a really great tool for a lot of people to go back and reflect on and just think about what is their relationship with those different things.
Yeah.
So any last words of wisdom for a parent who might be watching and either considering wilderness therapy, or maybe they have a child there now and they're just really feeling kind of stuck?
Yes. I would say one thing I would just say is look at ways that you can take care of yourselves. Our self-care is how we increase our capacity to be with unsolvable problems and not rush into fix. That, like you said, there is something intrinsically kind of embedded in our nervous systems that want to jump into that fix-it role. That's in there. And sometimes that actually contributes to the problem. The way that I did that last line, the solutions can be part of the problem. So we want to try to take care of ourselves. And I would say that I would highly encourage, and after working with, with intensives and helping young people see their parents, transform their own lives, and then being inspired to transform themselves. Intensives are something I would highly recommend to anybody, considering, taking a leap of faith into their own personal growth. I can't think of anything better, to do something that could be done in a weekend's time. It gets out of that 50-minute session into a place of deep relationship with a therapist, a place of being seen and understood, so that we can really start tapping into that curiosity into our lives. And that opens many, many doors we never even knew possible. So I would encourage parents to take care of themselves, consider, doing their own work, whether that's, investing in time in a therapeutic intensive, finding an attachment-based therapist, being in a place of curiosity in their own kind of journaling or personal kind of introspection, find relationships and groups of other parents who they can relate to. So important. And to know that, this idea of needing to get it right or get it wrong, that is part of the problem. It's about being a self, being authentic, being able to say, I'm going to mess up sometimes, I'm sorry that Johnny down the street's parents love marijuana in the house. For me, I can't sleep. It makes me anxious. I can't have it in the home. That's the kids are going to respond a lot better to that idea of responding to a parent who is connected to themselves versus connected to this right or wrong ideology.
Right. Wow, Travis, thank you so much for this. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours, but we will put all the information of how to find you and the intensives. I assume you have a schedule and a website that people can go to.
Absolutely.
And just to clarify, people don't have to have a child at Evoke, right? To go to an intensive. Okay.
Yeah, no, we work with couples, families. We work with a lot of young adults in intensives now. So people in their mid-20s, 30s. Like we just had an intensive recently where we had a brand new parent. He said, I want to go do an intensive to help, show up the way that I want to show up for my newborn.
Wow, no, there's an insightful person.
Yeah, so it's an inspiring place to be, and we have an amazing team of therapists. Thank you so much, Brenda, for your time, and it's so great to be connected with the Sky's the Limit group. And please reach out. It's intensives at evoketherapy.com, or you can reach me. It's Travis at evoketherapy.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And if you're watching, thanks for watching. And we will be back in March for another great talk. So definitely stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Travis.
You're welcome.